You know the name. It's a name that, even a century later, still means something. The Ace of Aces, Rittmeister Manfred Albrecht Freiherr von Richthofen. Yeah, that's a mouthful. You probably know him as the Red Baron. So today we're going to dive into the story of probably the most famous fighter pilot of all time and the mystery that still swirls around his final moments.
Because that's the thing. On April 21st, 1918, the greatest hunter in the skies was himself shot down and killed. Just like that, the world's most legendary pilot was gone. But that's when a whole new debate got started, one that's lasted for over 100 years. Who actually fired the fatal shot? Was it another ace pilot, high up in the sky? Or was it some anonymous soldier, firing from the mud below?
And this is where it all ended. This is the wreckage of his iconic red triplane, picked apart by souvenir hunters in a field in France. It's a pretty stark image, right? And it's really the starting point for our whole story. To get to the bottom of the mystery of his death, we first have to understand the man and the legend he built.
So yeah, we're going to start at the end, with the shocking moment he fell from the sky, a moment that sealed his place in history forever.
This number, it says it all. 80. That's his official tally of confirmed kills in the air. 80. It was the highest score of any pilot in World War I, on any side. For Germany, this wasn't just a number. He was a national hero, a massive propaganda victory in a war that was just dragging on and on. And for his enemies? Well, he was a name they both respected and feared.
But here's the thing. To really understand why that final flight was so strange, so completely out of character for him, we need to rewind a bit. Who was this guy before he became the Red Baron? Let's take a look at the world that made him. Richthofen was absolutely a product of his world. He was a Freiherr, that means baron, born into the Prussian nobility. And from the time he was a kid, his life was all about two things: the military and hunting. He and his brothers were out there chasing wild boar, elk, deer, you name it. And that hunter's instinct, it would define exactly how he fought his war.
You know, he actually started the war as a cavalryman on horseback, but pretty quickly, trench warfare made that job totally obsolete. He was bored, he was frustrated, and so he put in for a transfer to the air service with this amazing, almost defiant quote. He wanted action, and boy, was he about to find it up in the clouds.
All right, so this is it. This is where the legend is really born. This is where the cavalry officer transforms into a knight of the air.
Now here's where we get to bust a major myth. The Red Baron wasn't some reckless, hotshot daredevil. Not at all. He was a cold, calculating tactician. His mentor was the great Oswald Boelcke, who wrote the book, literally, on air combat tactics, and Richthofen followed those rules to the letter. He was a marksman who stalked his prey, always trying to dive from above with the sun at his back, while his squadron watched his tail. Think predator, not acrobat.
Of course, you can't talk about the Red Baron without talking about the red plane. He first painted his fighter bright red, but it wasn't just for show. It was actually tactical. This way, the other pilots in his elite squadron could easily spot their leader in the absolute chaos of a dogfight. And pretty soon, his whole unit, Jagdgeschwader 1, became known as the Flying Circus. The name was perfect. Partly because of all the brightly colored planes, sure, but also because the whole unit was completely mobile. They could pack up and move up and down the front lines like a real traveling circus, setting up tents wherever the action was thickest. But then, right at the height of his fame, in the summer of 1917, something happened that would change everything. An event that many people believe led directly to his death less than a year later.
On July 6, 1917, a bullet grazed his skull in combat. He was disoriented, temporarily blinded. Somehow he managed to land his plane, but the head wound was serious. And yet, just a few weeks later, he was back in the cockpit, completely against his doctor's orders. From that day on, he was just different. He started suffering from terrible headaches, nausea, and people said his whole personality changed.
And this quote, wow, it's from his own autobiography, which he wrote after the injury, and it is just haunting. You can feel it, right? The thrill of the hunt was gone. He felt like the war had turned him from a sportsman into a butcher. So the point is, the man flying on that final day in 1918 was not the same man who had first painted his plane red.
Which brings us right back to April 21st, 1918. So let's break down exactly what happened that day, that series of events that led to the hunter finally becoming the hunted. He made a string of uncharacteristic and ultimately fatal mistakes. First, he dove in to rescue his cousin. Okay, fine. But then he got completely fixated on one target, a rookie Canadian pilot named Wap May. He chased May down to treetop level, flying way, way over enemy lines. This broke all of his own rules, the very rules that had kept him alive for so long. And it was right then that a single bullet hit him.
So, the million-dollar question, who fired that shot? Well, the RAF officially gave credit to a Canadian captain, Roy Brown, who had dived on the Red Baron from above. But the autopsy told a different story. The bullet actually entered Richthofen's right side and traveled upwards. Now, that trajectory just doesn't work with Brown's attack angle from above and to the left. The modern consensus, based on that forensic evidence, points to fire from the ground. An Australian sergeant named Cedric Popkin, using a machine gun, is now considered the most likely person. He was in the perfect spot to hit him from the side as that red plane flew by.
But maybe the more important question isn't who killed him. Maybe it's why. Why did the master tactician put himself in that incredibly vulnerable position in the first place? Well, there are two really compelling theories. The first one points right back to that head wound from 1917. Modern studies suggest it might have caused lasting brain damage, affecting his judgment, making him more impulsive, and leading to that intense target fixation on the rookie pilot. The other theory is just burnout, cumulative combat stress. After years of fighting day in and day out, the immense pressure of being a living legend, of having to be the Red Baron every single day, it may have just finally worn him down and caused him to make one simple, tired mistake. What happened next, though, really says everything about the kind of legacy he left. The very men who had been fighting him, the Australians of No. 3 Squadron, were the ones who recovered his body, and they gave him a full military funeral. His enemies acted as his pallbearers. Allied squadrons laid wreaths on his grave, and this was the inscription on one of them, "To our gallant and worthy foe." I mean, think about that. Even in the middle of a horrible war, there was this incredible respect for the skill and the bravery of the man they had all tried so hard to defeat. So in the end, who was he? Was he the national hero that Germany celebrated? Was he the butcher that he himself feared he'd become? Or was he, in a way, a victim, worn down by his wounds, the stress of war, and the impossible weight of being a legend? What do you think?